Welcome, brothers and sisters. This is Mindspace Art, the host of Soul Purpose, where we deep dive into the dark underbelly of postmodern madness. Here, we endeavor to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly, and to glean from that excursion what pearls of wisdom we may. All of this in hopes that what we learn will equip us for the spiritual war which our world has become embroiled in. Prepare as together we face an onslaught of illusion, demons, and death on the treacherous path towards enlightenment. This is Soul Purpose.
I am Andrew Ryan, and I'm here to ask you a question. Is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, it belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, it belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, it belongs to everyone. I rejected those answers. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture. A city where the artist would not fear the censor, where the scientist would not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, Rapture can become your city as well.
Hello everybody, welcome to Soul Purpose. This is Mindspace Art, and today we're going to do an expansion talk on the video that got released last night. For those of you who weren't around, we debuted and premiered a video that I had put together, which was sort of a special thing, my own heart and soul project that was sort of a fan trailer of what the Bioshock film or something like that would look like. So I tried to bring that world to life because the Bioshock franchise is so rife with archetypal symbolism and important themes and concepts for the world we're currently living in, and I think that's why it gained so much traction in the pop culture. So a lot of people were taken by this franchise and what it represented in the aesthetic, and I don't think that that's by accident. I think it speaks to something deeply subconscious about our whole society that we're living in. And that's why people enjoyed it. So, basic overview is that you, as the protagonist in the first game, you crash land. Your flight goes down in the middle of the ocean, but there's a lighthouse there, and the lighthouse is actually an apparatus for bringing you down further into the depths of the ocean, where you find that there is this whole city that was created, which is explained to us by Andrew Ryan in a sort of a 50s-ish reel, film reel, or maybe it's more like the 30s, and he breaks down who he is as the creator of this great city, what his perspective is, and how he rejected all of the typical answers to should a man keep what are the fruits of his labors, and he says the man in Washington says no, it belongs to the poor. And the man in the Vatican says no, the labors of man belong to God. And the man of Moscow says that it belongs to everyone, right? So this sort of begins with this critique of the various systems that are man-made. he's saying, he's criticizing the this idea of redistribution of goods and redistribution of the fruits of man's labor. And so he also goes into saying this is all happening while you're submerging deeper down into the depths of the ocean and seeing Rapture for the first time, sort of this 30s-ish looking city that's sort of steampunk-esque, and it's just really cool, the whole aesthetic of it. But he's saying that, he rejected those answers given by those man-made systems, and now instead he decided to create this underwater city where man will it will be completely fair because only man will receive the the recompense for his efforts. And so he's saying this place is going to be a utopia for the innovators and the artists and the creatives and these everybody who has a contribution to make that is above the general run of society. And so he kind of gives that invigorating monologue speech to begin with at the game. That's your introduction to this man who created this vast underwater labyrinthine city. And of course the game itself takes a more wild direction as you get into it further, because you automatically get the sense when you arrive into that underwater city that things haven't turned out the way that Andrew Ryan was saying that they would go. And your first introduction is to a sort of wild madman that's called a splicer, who's trying to open up the submarine that you just came down from and basically kill you, right? So the beginning of the game is that you're under attack and everything is very darkly lit, and the city infrastructure is leaking and things are in disarray. It's very the aesthetic is very sort of gloomy and horrific, with all of this, with the lighting really ties it in all together, and it creates this amazing atmosphere when you're playing the game. You can actually look out around you, as you're going through the tunnels, which and the city infrastructure, because you can sort of look out like you would be looking out the side of a ship, underwater, and see all of the vastness of the ocean and the rest of the city. And it's just such a cool, beautiful image that was created by that company. And you can obviously see why people were taken with this aesthetic, because it's, you're underwater. It's almost like you're in the subconscious. You're in the unconscious of society, perhaps. You're in the depths. It's supposed to create that atmosphere of being alone, cut off from the rest of the world, from society. It is its own place, removed from everything. So you could even see it as being something that is about the individual's unconscious, or maybe the subconscious of the creator of the city, right? Because while on one hand, Andrew Ryan is saying we're going to have this utopia where there's going to be no gods, no kings, only man. That's one of the slogans that you get. And it's written on a banner, and it's got a statue of a man, and it's supposed to show that this true individualistic utopian model that says we can perfect this exchange of effort. We can make sure that every man gets his due reward, and we will make. So I suppose some people have called this game sort of a critique of Ayn Rand, who is this, I suppose, an individualist sort of capitalist philosopher. I don't know much about Ayn Rand. I can't say much on that, but people have related that philosopher to this story. So anyway, so that banner says, no gods, no kings, only man. And that's a great vision if you can bring it to fruition and actually it works. But we see that there's something that was wrong here in the whole philosophy of the creation of Rapture. Because if that was the standard and that was supposed to bring this city to new heights of science and art and wisdom, then we can see just by the beginning introduction to the game, let alone anything else and everything else that comes afterward, as demonstrating the failure of that philosophy, the abysmal nature, if you will, of that following that trajectory. When you venerate man above all things, what can you get? And we see in the course of the game that you're picking up all this evidence and you're listening back to the tapes and you find all of these clues, and it's all helping you to see a wider picture of what was going on in this city and what led to Rapture's demise into social strife, civil war and chaos, and ultimately just barbarism that has a scientific flavor to it, which you can see by the usage of these, Eve, right, which is this genetic sort of material that is what the city is run on in some respect. And I just want to bring up quickly here this wiki on Eve, because it's going to be important for the rest of the discussion here. So I'll just go to the wiki and read it here. Okay. So Eve is the genetic substance which powers the use of plasmids. In its liquid form, it glows bright blue and can be seen in the dark. And let's see here. Let's try and find out the... Yeah, so it's a genetic genetic substance, it says, and so it winds up being something that it's synthetic, but it's also what the people wind up being dependent on. And the enemies in the game, a lot of them, they are, these splicers, these you could think of them almost as like Eve addicts, and they're obsessed with this substance. And even the game alludes to this idea that the whole city runs on Eve, and it becomes this obsessive thing where people are always after it. But of course, when we think of Eve, we think of like the Bible and like Adam and Eve being also representing maybe like the sacred feminine, or that which is the heart-based, or ingenuity, artistry, creativity. But it's interesting that is sort of subverted, or it is turned on its head in the course of the game, because Eve is this, as I said, a genetic synthetic substance. So it's created by man. It's created by Adam, whom we know is fallen, right? And just to speak it metaphorically, right? Because the city which venerates man, of course, man being, archetypally related to Adam. So it is Adam who is synthesizing this substance called Eve, right? But it's not the real thing. It's not Eve herself. It's not the true Eve. It is a synthetic replacement. And so we could think about how this relates to our current world, where so much is synthetic, so much is just GMO and created in a lab. It's all chemically combined. And people even today, of course, selling us the Ghibli juice, saying, this is going to help you, this is going to save you, this is going to protect you. And you could also relate this, of course, to drugs and other forms of pharmakeia and pharmaceutical addictions and these kinds of things, which is, so it's this prescription by the these venerated scientists of Rapture who have, come up with this substance. And basically it is, I'm just speaking from my perspective, looking at this in a cursory light. I might not be, getting this all right with the symbolism and everything, but if you think about it, it would be that because this city of Rapture has devolved into this sort of technocratic, scientistic situation, which we see throughout the game. I mean, you see all kinds of mad scientists who experiment on, there's even a boss who is just a total butcher, sort of tries to reorganize the structure of the face and the beauty, so-called, of women. I think he's sort of like a psychotic, beauty surgeon, and he goes completely off the rails and starts to believe that, just deforming the figure of the woman is and splicing up and rearranging her features till she looks like just a gargoyle creature, that is somehow beauty. And you could see the psychotic nature of the scientist in that frame, and how there is that bent to everything that is happening in Rapture, how it all devolved. These scientific, powerful people within Rapture, obviously they came up with these substances like Eve, or they learned how to market things to people. That's a big thing in the whole game. Everything is sort of this, you think of like the housewife ads on television, and it's really like that, and it's all over the place in Rapture as you're going about putting the pieces together of what happened to the city, why everybody has gone insane down there, and it really demonstrates this, like I was saying, like the marketing aspect too of these substances, which have been concocted by this sort of scientific class, which Andrew Ryan talks about how, well, the scientist is the innovator and he should be able to get the fruits of his labors, and he's doing it for the highest good, and it's all going to be peachy keen here. But we can see that in this situation, it hasn't gone that way at all. The substances created by the scientists have addicted the entire population to that substance, and then on top of that, it kind of becomes this, and there's also this other nature of it where, there's security, sort of like turrets and things which are basically robots that just fly around and surveil things, and there's cameras everywhere in the city, and that kind of speaks to that as well, of sort of like relating this sort of scientific, authoritarian devolution that happens in Rapture to an emergent paranoia and the securitizing of everything and the surveillance of everything, and so the city almost seems that it had gotten so, the population had gotten so insane, so addicted to the creations of the sort of scientific elite, that they had become this barbarous, wandering mass trying to get this substance, this addiction, and thus it devolved also into sort of a prison city, where that's the opposite of innovation. That's the opposite of free enterprise. That's the opposite of this laissez-faire. We can all, by the fruit, by the efforts of our own labor and ingenuity, rise up and take control of our destiny. We see that didn't work out at all in Rapture, and that's sort of, I guess, the brilliance of how they have told this story and how they've conveyed through the aesthetic quality of this, and also the writing in this series to show, that the failings and the excesses. And it has to do, if we want to take it back to the Eve thing, and also the word Adam, I believe that there's a byproduct of Eve in the game, which is called Adam. So that's a separate thing, which, allows you to like upgrade your upgrade your powers, I suppose. Yeah, right, with these plasmids, which the Eve is used to create the plasmids, which give you, sort of like superpowers in the game. So there is a transhumanist kind of element here with all that. But with the Adam and Eve thing, we could see that related to that with the biblical aspect that, and especially because this is underwater, it's submerged, it's below, it's almost like closer to hell, and it's clouded and insulated by the water itself over the entire expanse of the city. That this is actually maybe an allusion to the fallen nature of mankind, and that it's not, you can't just come up with these utopian schemes and believe that, hey, just because we have the greatest ideals, that means that, that people are going to, be just rational creatures. We could see that that's absolutely not the case, because the whole city fell apart. And why did the city fall apart? Because it wound up being about petty power politics. You find out is one aspect that goes on in the course of the game. You wind up seeing how all of these characters who had some sway over the populace began infighting and trying to capture the political fervor of Rapture as it was descending further into a sort of chaotic madness. And it got out of hand, and then it wound up being more something that was about power. So the advertising aspect of it is very clear. There's sort of a neon glow to everything. You think of Art Deco, sort of like the Gatsby aesthetic, and sort of brilliantly showing that, with also the addition of these sort of old-timey ads for let me pull up some of these. Okay, well, of course we've got one ad, which is Evolution in a Bottle, Plasmids, Ryan Industries. So the idea is that what they're going to offer you will help you to evolve. And the whole of Rapture is supposed to be, man above all else, man above God. And we can see that doesn't exactly play out. And that is part of the message there of the game. And we have some other ads besides, which are kind of interesting. Let's see here. We've got Beef E, The Flavor You Remember, and Calcio, most effective milk substitute on the market. 32% of your recommended daily dose of calcium. Wow. Anybody think of oat milk here, or almond milk, or any of these other things, these substitutes? So we can see that the food even is synthetic down here in Rapture. And so everything is created out of some lab, and it's supposed to give you a substitute, right? There's another ad here. It says, Monday morning blues, perk up with Infetatime or Infetatime. Yeah, well, we know the obvious parallel there, and it's a guy being fed a bunch of blue pills. which is interesting. I don't know if that was on purpose by the artist here, but there could be some sort of correlation there. And then there's another ad here for the museum in Rapture. It says, "You won't believe your eyes. The terror from the deep." And it's got, a skeleton from a whale or something like this. And but what is the terror? I mean, the whole city of Rapture is really the terror, is the fearful thing. The fearful thing is not, this skeleton of a whale or whatever. It's, the terror is within. The terror is within, the hearts of the people who created this city and who are, trapping everybody in it with their sort of labyrinthine maze of not only just by the aspect of how the city is constructed itself, in which there doesn't seem to be any way out of it. It's away from the sun. It's out of the sunlight, which means, it's outside of reason. It's outside of God, of the divine or the higher truths. It is purely submerged, and it is, it is the terror from the deep. It is part of the malaise of, abdication of the soul, and so that's why it's outside of. That's why it's at the ocean floor. It's outside of the way of the sun. So we can see that there's all these ads here, and this, of course, speaks to the marketing aspect of trying to sell people on this utopia that really just gets everybody addicted, and then they're just lab rats and in this maze with no way out. And we could think of things in our own world, the pharmakia, the prescriptions, the television, the entertainment, everything which is made by the hands of man, that is in our own world, which is really a constriction on artistry and true creativity. It creates out of this working class that is supposed to maintain the city, right? Because you think of Rapture as this massive sort of metallic structure that has to be maintained because there's so much technological sophistication that even enables one to, build this city underwater, that it's got to be maintained by the workers, by the people who are actually involved on the ground, dealing with, you figure if this place springs a leak, then the whole city might go out or it might be destroyed. So, it would be by the hands of those who are maintaining the city that so much would act, is the only way that this place would get kept up. But, that requires social harmony. That requires an accord in the population of the people of Rapture, which obviously did not sustain. It went away. It went to the wayside because, as we discover as the protagonist going throughout the story, that it all just sort of breaks down. Because of the political strife, the civil war, the infighting, the technocratic overreach, the use of technology, pharmakia, and marketing, which winds up being lording it over the people of Rapture. It cannot be sustained. And so that is why we as the player, we can see that the whole thing is collapsing. It is collapsing right before our eyes. There's obviously a moral collapse, and the people are so deranged and so addicted, to what has been, metered out to them by this, through these plasmids and through the genetic experimentation, through, this idea that people are going to get powers from what they do. If they take, these plasmid injections, we can see that that goes out the wayside, and then all you have is, this underclass of people who are constantly on the hamster wheel, just trying to get a fix, and so they become insane, they become destructive, and that really is just that they've imbibed the poison of the cunning of reason, as it is called, which would be all the propaganda that was told to them about this utopian world that they all came to, which only sank to the lowest depths, if you will, in terms of a spiritual thing. So there is no spirituality in this place other than some vague utopian idea of man's personal autonomy. And so we could see that there's a critique here of that autonomy and where it leads to in the excesses. And of course, we have this figure of Atlas, who is the the guy who he's guiding you along. He's a helping voice. He's supposed to be a guiding light, and he's constantly asking you to do things because he's really wants to save his family, and he needs your help, and he needs you to go out there and fight his battles for him so that his family can be saved. And so there's this constant emotional appeal by Atlas, who is sort of ostensibly on your side throughout the missions in the game. And we actually come to find out that he is not who he says he is. He had, he was a much different character than that. So, I mean, I'll read a little bit about Atlas here from the wiki so we can get an idea of his background. When Ryan nationalized Fontaine Futuristics, Atlas protested against him in front of citizens. With Frank Fontaine declared dead by the Rapture Council, Atlas used the poorhouses left behind to create disillusioned citizens and build up supporters against Ryan. He makes his headquarters, and Atlas's followers gathered weapons, plasmids, and gene tonics to arm themselves. This did not go unnoticed by Ryan, who had Atlas and some of his close followers sent to Fontaine's department store, which had been converted into a prison to house the remainder of Fontaine's army. Ryan hoped that this would put an end to the tension that had been created, but Atlas escaped on New Year's Eve, bringing with him splicers, whom he had gained as allies while in the prison. The action which officially started the Civil War was the 1958 New Year's Eve riots and the terrorist bombing of the party at the Kashmir restaurant, where many of the important and wealthy people in Rapture were gathered for a masquerade ball. Okay, well, the masquerade, we think obviously of like the Rothschild party and the fact that we're living in a giant masquerade now, right? With these measures for COVID-19, right? And we also think of, let's say, Eyes Wide Shut here in relation to this. But the masquerade is talking about what is, the unconscious, right? It's the splitting. It's the ideal versus the reality, right? So the ideal of Rapture is that it's going to be a utopia. It's going to be for the people. We're going to put the power in people's hands. But the masquerade aspect is that behind that ideal is something that's much more malevolent, and you don't know what's behind the mask, right? So it's a veil that separates things, and that's also what plays into the whole motif of the story, which is that you're below the water, you're below the waves, right? So that is that otherworldly realm. It's almost closer to hell. And it is in that hell world, or that you could see it as maybe the subconscious, or man without the soul, his dark aspect, begins to rule. And so the masquerade reveals behind the opulence and sort of the Great Gatsby-esque partying and the lavishness of maybe the higher class within this city, that we could see the violent undertones, we could see the destructive nature, we could see the addiction and the strife, the social discontents which are behind that. And then Atlas serves as this, ostensibly a sort of revolutionary figure who's trying to overthrow the tyrannical Andrew Ryan, and maybe for a good purpose, or the idea being that you could see him being in that way, and he's marshaling the support of the people. But of course, we don't really see that there's many good guys in this entire story. We have to question each and every bit of it, and by the end, we really get that moment of lucidity when we realize that Atlas, who had been setting you up along this path to go and do his will, that in the end it turns out that he himself was actually Frank Fontaine, who supposedly had died, but really had just taken on this different persona and was just trying to dethrone Andrew Ryan so that he could elevate Fontaine Futuristics. And so we could see that by doing that, he was making that bargain of saying, I would rather rule in hell than to serve in heaven, right? Because if Rapture is hell, then, and it is a form of hell, because people have lost their sensitivity, they have lost their sensibility, everything is a resource, the people have become a resource, and they're just all squabbling for the next fix. And so, this is something, everything is about extraction, stealing, and, a parasitic society that is created there. And so that's the world, or the city that Frank Fontaine wants to control. And he's got all of the automatic roboticized surveillance system and, means of destruction and warfare at his disposal. So he can rule this undercity that has completely fallen apart on the basis of using that weaponry, using that technological sophistication. But who would want to rule this place? Only an insane person would want to, because there's nothing that matches any of the ideals upon which it was built to begin with, which was ostensibly innovation, was the elevation of the arts, was the elevation of science. And we can see how all of that has been perverted and corrupted and used as a weapon, and it's all for the power-hungry, selfish desires of people such as Atlas, who is Frank Fontaine, and has manipulated you, the protagonist, towards his will. And that is the whole purpose of the speech that Andrew Ryan gives when you do confront him for the assassination, because he demonstrates to you, and they kind of do it brilliantly in the game with making the cut scene so that you as the player, you can't choose otherwise than to kill Ryan at his own command. So and Ryan says, a man chooses and a slave obeys, and he commands you to obey, and so you kill him, but it was at Ryan's command, and then it was before that, it was Atlas's command, right? And Atlas had been doing this by saying these things of, everything was, would you kindly do this? Would you kindly do that? And it was, that's a sort of, seems like a harmless phrase, but of course there's a lot that's actually packed into it. It's this subtlety and this persuasion, and he seems like he's your friend. He seems like he's got a good intent, and it turns out that was all a sham. That was all a veneer and a lie, and that his designs were actually for power. So, and Ryan explains this to you, by bringing to mind that phrase, well, would you kindly? Would you kindly? And that sparks a flashback in the game of the protagonist recalling all the times that Atlas had used that phrase, and it was so many times throughout the whole game, and you might not really have taken much notice of it if you're just playing through for the first time, but then upon reflection, you wind up seeing that you're right. It's like I did all of these things. I went point A to point B. I completed the whole campaign on the basis of what this figure was telling me, and I couldn't have done otherwise, it seems, because I was just following the command and the lead of this voice that was seemingly on my side. And so that is the sort of interesting and well-written and sort of profound way in which this whole game is sort of structured with the writing. And, before you actually go and confront and kill Andrew Ryan, who was this creator of the whole city of Rapture and the whole idea of it, you're in this room, and I used this in the Bioshock trailer edit, where towards the beginning, where it's like cork board and all of these threads connected, and the photographs of the faces of the characters that you wind up killing in the course of the game at the behest of Atlas, ostensibly for a good purpose, who were really just his political rivals. And so you see it on the corkboard arranged by these threads and all how it's all connected, and then written on blood on the top of it is that phrase, would you kindly? Would you kindly? And so that was demonstrating that Andrew Ryan had discovered. He knew what was going on. He saw that you, the character, were at the behest of Atlas the whole time, and that he was the one who was masterminding your actions, right? And so it plays into the question, the whole basis of the game of fate versus free will, truth versus lies, the masquerade, the masked aspect of it, the submergence below the city in contrast to the light of day below the surface, and where the choices that you had actually were, and so Ryan is emphasizing, that the character has been a slave the entire time, and we don't even know if how you got to Rapture was on the basis of your, just a happenstance, right? Because there was a plane crash, and then you arrive at the lighthouse, which takes you down into the city. There's a tunnel that goes down in a submarine that gets you there, and we wind up having to question the whole backstory of the protagonist, and was he sort of mind controlled? Was he set up? And that's the idea that we get from the story arc, is that you as the protagonist, you were just a prop, you are a pawn in a game in order to dispense with the political those who are in contrast to the political opposition to Atlas, who is Frank Fontaine, and you are just an implement in his hands. You are just a tool. And so it really is such a kind of shocking, puzzle when you put it all together, and you see that, it relates very much to our real world. And I tried to emphasize this on the Boiler Room about, the would you kindly. Well, it's kind of like that in our current world. Would you kindly social distance? Would you kindly not see your relatives? Would you kindly wear the mask? Would you kindly, take this injection? Would you kindly use this passport? Would you kindly be tracked and traced? And on and on and on it goes. And, just because something is told to us in a seemingly rational tone and, an emotional appeal upon which we have our sympathy sort of sprung, then it doesn't mean that is for a good purpose. And I feel that Atlas is a figure that demonstrates that through the lens of Bioshock. And so, we can see that this whole city fails. This whole city, this utopia that is ostensibly built on, rationalism and human progress, just devolves into the worst excesses of power politic, realpolitik mixed with the aberration of the genetic modification, the transhumanism, the surveillance city, and it is its own self-contained hell. So I hope that I've spoken to the main points of interest that I've found in this this series and in this first and second game, which are sort of set below the surface, and then the third game goes beyond that. But there's so much more that you could get out of this franchise, I think. And there's a very, I hope that we could somehow get that trailer out there much more, because this game was really a pop culture phenomenon, and I think that that's no accident. It's because it speaks to something very deeply true about the situation that we are in currently, and it is really because of that people were connecting with it so much, subconsciously and unconsciously, and it just captivated the imagination of so many millions of people. And this is really owing to the stark and amazing capability of the storytelling that is woven in here. And this is a video game narrative done right. This is a story arc done right anyway, because it just makes you ask questions, and it really gets at the heart of a lot of what is going on in our modern world, and it tells it in such a compelling way, and it really puts you at that crossroads as the protagonist, wondering how much agency have I had here? How much agency, and who's the good guy and who's the bad guy? How can I tell? Maybe I'm getting tricked. Maybe I'm being led astray. Maybe I'm being led to believe that I'm doing good when I may actually be working for another oppressor, right? So there's many people who have their designs and their desire to see their will come to fruition, and we could see that in the world of Bioshock. So I think it's an amazing sort of story, and that I hope that this spawns other people looking into it and, becoming intrigued with how they put this all together. And I'm sure that I missed things, and I hope that, that more can come to light about this tale as we go forward. But yeah, I really appreciate everybody sticking around. If you saw the premiere, you can also check out that video, which is called A Man Chooses. A piece from that Andrew Ryan speech that he gives at the end of the game. You can find that on alternatecurrentradio.com, and we'll also have another special video lined up for this next week, so please stay tuned. We've got more stuff coming that hopefully helps to speak to the soul, speak to the heart of the matter, and kind of gets deep philosophically. So I thank everybody who tuned in here tonight, and I hope to be speaking with you again very soon.